Hello and welcome to Gotham Sound TV. I'm Nick Houston. Today I am joined by Geoff from Wisycom.
And DPA.
And DPA, that's right. The Wisley DPA Alliance is alive and well here in the US. Geoff, thank you for being here.
No, thank you for having me. It's great to be up here again.
You just flew in from Washington, D.C., and boy, is your hand injured.
I don't, Ed, it's terribly embarrassing to talk about the hand. I got the Pelican case full of equipment for our things later today, and using the wrong tool, I took a pair of scissors to the zip tie and said, yeah, this should be easy, and tagged myself in the hand. So when we started this, they said, oh, can you clap? And I said, that's going to be a real challenge for me today.
What's the sound of one hand clapping? There you go. This is literally an Ask Geoff Anything. So you have been with Wisycom for much longer than I had thought.
Yeah, December of 2017 is when I was hired. And it's been a really fun journey along the way. Which I think brings us to the first thing let's talk about, because this has been it's come up a few times and some things that we did a press release on it. But, I've been with Wisycom since December of 2017. Mm-hmm. In July of this year, DPA and Wisycom US merged operations here in the United States. And that's, has been working very well. We've been very excited to have the enhanced logistics support service, mm-hmm. everything based out of Longmont, Colorado.
Right. Right. Yeah, exactly. And they have they have a big team out there in terms of the sales staff. They're very responsive. And it's nice to have that kind of additional home base. Yeah.
We went from Wisycom. We've always kept a very small footprint out of a lot of intentionality, just how we were kind of going at it. And it was usually, a few of us, but now we've enhanced the entire DPA sales team. Here in New York, it's our great friend Tom Parisi. Around the rest of the U.S. is, guys like Alan, Carlito helps with mm-hmm. Atlanta, JC, Tom, Matt, Chris. It's a great team outside of the office, plus the team in the office.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, well, look, so this is Ask Geoff Anything, and there's already comments in there, so we should stop messing around and get to it. So Whitney Ince wants to know, what's the timeline on the new plug-on transmitter, presumably the MTP60?
That's an excellent question. I was told, I said to Nick before this, I heard through the grapevine that Whitney Ince was prepped with a stream of questions
very good.
To try and trip me. So I have answers, not the ones you're looking for on this one, unfortunately. The new plug-on is in the development pipeline, but I don't have a definitive timeline on
mm-hmm.
it.
Got it. Okay. Stay tuned for that. Everything's Fine 3 wants to know, in the scenario using a 16-to-1 combiner mode on the CSI 16T, band also wants all 16 mixes to be transmitting in a secondary area, thrust. What is the best way to approach this? Geoff, you understand this.
Yes.
I do not. So you tell me.
So this is asking about IEMs, and this applies as well to IFBs for, location, broadcast, whatever applications. A lot of what we'll talk about in this as far as RF and things will apply to the kind of work that you guys do in film, TV, whatever, as well as like touring applications and major broadcast installations. So what we're talking about here is the CSI 16, which is the passive combiner for what we call our MTK982, or the previous generation, which was the 952. But the MTK982 is a stereo IEM transmitter or mono IFB transmitter. So the reason I back up to explain that is completely passive combiners, and the MTK will forward power up to 2 watts to make up for the insertion loss. Talking about insertion loss, probably an entire other conversation, but so what you can do with this is the CSI 16 is a smart passive combiner. So what this person's asking is, I have 16 channels, 16 stereo mixes, and I want to combine that to one antenna.
Right.
So when we want to do a second part of the stage, let's say it's a long thrust, all that to get to our answer here is, you could do one of a couple ways. One is you could just take that E output and do a 1-to-2 split. We make a CSA 121T, which is a nice transmit combiner, and do the split and take a 3 dB hit, send it down 100 feet, which you'd lose about 3 dB, which is half the power, in that cable, and put another antenna. The Wisycom MTK uses something called direct digital synthesis, so that transmit signal will always be in phase, no matter where you walk on your stage.
I like that.
Yeah, and the same applies, we'll talk later, I'm sure, about fiber. You can do the same thing with a few more steps via that secondary output to do a remote stage via fiber.
Cool. So same person says, passive splitter combiner, the E output. I think that's exactly what you just asked, or just answered, right? About the the overall output power, the multipath, and all that stuff.
Yeah, and with the Wisycom, because of the direct digital synthesis and the true diversity belt packs, there's really not a concern of multipath. Multipath, for anyone not terribly deep into RF, it's totally all right, is in a lot of systems, it's primarily happens in digital, where you have two transmit antennas, it's all ones and zeros. They're arriving to that receiver out of time. And so it'll create some issues in typical multipath.
Got it. But the Wisycom system is a very good, very, very good analog system. So does it not, does the lack of ones and zeros help in that instance? Or
Yeah. Okay. So the Wisycom is digitally processed, but analog modulation.
I see.
Everything inside the unit is happening digitally. We find the whole reason on analog modulation is for things like this, but as well, when we start getting into the real technical side of RF, is the digital signals need a lot more signal to noise compared to the analogs. So when you get into complex environments like stadiums, like even New York City, you want something that is very, very robust in challenging environments.
So basically, the even though it's an analog transmission, there is like a digital compander that's companding the signal, and then there's a DSP on the other end that's expanding it.
Basically, ish.
Okay, great.
There's a long thing, and if Massimo's watching at home, he will happily be able to explain all the math. And
very good. Should we say buongiorno to Massimo?
Very good. It's late there, so it's espresso time in Italy.
It's espresso. This next one from Kyle Sherling, who wants to know spring clip for the MTP61, and also says, "Hi, Geoff."
Hello, Kyle. Good to hear you. The spring clip is something in question that I've raised with Italy, and I don't have an answer, but we'll work on one for you, because I know it's something that has been or is in development, because I've seen the mechanical prototypes for it. So I need to investigate where it is between mechanical engineering office or R&D and production.
Yeah, I imagine a spring clip for a transmitter of that size is hard, because you want to try to keep the transmitter small, but the spring clip can often double the size of it.
Yeah, and that was trying to find a way to mount it to keep it in a reasonable amount of space.
Got it. Whitney has some questions about service. So service is happening in the USA versus items having to be shipped to Italy for service. And to follow up, what percentage of service is actually happening in Colorado versus what is being shipped to Italy for hardware service?
To be honest, I don't have the exact percentages offhand, but I know that our team is working constantly and very hard to continue to increase the percentage that is done here. Some of it, some of the things just require very specialized tools that it makes more sense for it to go back to the factory. But Andrew, the service manager in Longmont, is incredibly on top of it. And I think not next week, the week after, he'll be in Italy for the week for training.
And you just got back.
I was just in Italy, I think a week or two ago. So Andrew will be there spending the week with R&D and with the what we call them RMA guys. There's probably a more technical term, but the repair team.
Yeah.
To continue building the knowledge base and support base we have in Longmont. Because the goal is to continue increasing how much can be done in Longmont, because we know the more time you spend without your gear.
Right. Yeah. The more it stinks.
Yeah. So we want to continue, and that's our goal with part of, merging with DPA and building and increasing the team there, is to continue to reduce the turnaround times on those things.
Right. And I will say, from a vendor perspective, the having DPA be that responsive is fantastic. And there's growing pains, right? As people that are intimately familiar with all the SKUs of DPA, which there are hundreds, to then kind of add to their brain space wireless technology, which is very different. And the variations are not, it's not like talking about colors. It's talking about frequencies, and it's talking about quarter step, and it's talking about all these different things. So there's been a learning curve, and the team from Colorado has done well, and they're continuing to learn.
Yeah. And it's, the Wisycom products, even from, as you'll remember, like the MTP40, that was a very, very popular main transmitter a few years ago. Even just the internal technology from that to the 61 and 60 has just been a massive shift. The components are all small. There's some of our guys on our team that will talk about I never understood this, and this is probably just something that you used to have to do quartz and, replace out very specific components to get it to transmit on certain frequencies. The world of RF equipment has gotten so much more complex in what it does, and the size of it is just
itty bitty.
It's tiny.
Yeah. Okay, let's keep going with questions. So I think it says royal click. Thank you, Nate. The eyes aren't working as well as they used to. Hey, y'all, maybe a Wisycom Manager for Mac soon. Thanks for everything, Wisycom.
Manager for Mac, of the couple things that I basically spent a week talking about when I was there, we discussed a lot of things, but the thing I kept bringing up is Wisycom Manager for Mac and understanding how important it is. We've been kind of in this process of rebuilding Manager on the kind of back end, if you will, into this new platform called .NET MAUI. It's like a new .NET framework.
That sounds cool.
Yeah, what it allows us to do is compile the app for, or the software for Android, iOS, OS X, Windows, whatever else.
You can just port it over to what you want.
Yeah, so it's, we've been testing. I have some betas for, like the Apple M chip version of it, the ARM version of Managers that we've been testing. So it's coming. I don't have the timeline, but I know that it's in development actively.
Got it. Cool. Yeah, the people in the film and TV industry love their Macs.
I mean, it won't show here very well, but this is my Mac, and I love my Mac.
I see. Everything's fine. 3 wants to know, why is the LFA antenna not recommended for transmitting?
Yeah, it's an excellent question. And this really applies not just to the LFA, but also the ADFA and the BFAs, which, if you're unfamiliar, are all the active filtered antennas for Wisycom. And a lot of it revolves around the power levels. So when we're talking about transmit, we'll jump a little bit between milliwatts and dBm, right? So 10 milliwatts is about 10 dBm, and 100 being about 20 dBm. So we're huge amounts of power compared to receive is way below that. So when you put that much power into the amplifier the wrong direction,
it could potentially blow it out. Yeah, that makes sense. Does that happen with the non-filtered one as well? Like the
passive antennas can be transmit or receive.
No, but there's 3 levels of antennas, right? There's passive, then there's active, and then there's active filtered. So what about just the regular active
Same
ones?
with that.
Okay, so do not do that.
Correct.
That makes sense.
Yeah, basically anything with an LED or LCD display for Wisycom is a receive and only.
So one of the things we talked about was RF over fiber for transmitters, right? So to do an RF over fiber for transmitters, and forgive me if I'm wrong, so if you were to go into the T1, for instance, you have to take your RF transmitter signal, squeeze it down, right? Like, so let's say you're outputting 100 or 250 milliwatts. You have to squeeze it down by 24 dBm, let's say. So there's no problem going into that transmitter that way, right? Because it does have an LED on it. That's more what I'm trying to get at.
So
we're not going to hurt it.
So when we talk about fiber as a whole, are the real thing we talk about, Italy calls it oversaturation, but overloading the fiber.
I see.
That this applies to any RF over fiber system out there. Is you want to be very, very mindful not to overload it. On receive, it's typically a little more manageable because all the power levels are generally very low. Minus, if you've done any testing, you see it. If you have an antenna set up, somebody walks by and keys their radio, you're going to see the noise go up, overload, intermods like crazy across your thing. So on the transmit side, we designed the BFLT to manage transmits, but you have to manage it a little more mindfully. So if you want to do single carrier, you bring it down to 0 dBm, or effectively 0 milliwatts.
0 milliwatts?
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah, 0 dBm, 0 milliwatts.
Okay.
I have to be very careful on the math of explaining it.
Math is hard.
So you bring it down to 0 dBm, and you can go in. So on the Wizy MTK that we were talking about, it has the 2 outputs. You'll see on this, we have this BNC connector and the SMA. So in an application like this, where let's say I have a sound card, and this could be the same on a sound card or a touring stage, it's all kind of the same idea. We would send that BNC into our combiner. We'd send that 250 milliwatt signal for our local stage. But let's say I need to take just a couple channels, maybe one stereo signal out to the remote stage. Or if you're in a film, I need to just take my producer IFB out
to Video Village. Yeah,
yeah,
right,
because
exactly.
he's that person's the only one we care that they have it. So what we'll do is we'll take that SMA, go straight into the BFLT because that's coming out at 0 dBm. And then we'll send it to our BFLR.
So it's already ready, rated for that.
Yeah.
It's designed for that. Neat.
Yeah. So then when you get to the Video Village or wherever it is, now you've got this effectively a 0 milliwatt transmit carrier. And that passable if you had to, but that's where we bring in a box like the PAW.
The PA.
Yeah, exactly. And that will bring it up to a manageable level.
Right. Yeah. So you essentially you squeeze it down and then you re-expand it on the other side. And it's almost at like if you were doing 250 milliwatts on going in, squeeze it down and then unsqueeze it. It's not quite 250 milliwatts on the other side, but it's close.
It'll depend on your amplifier and where you get when you start doing all those attenuations and bring things back up. You start having to manage any amplifier is going to bring up noise.
Yes.
And that's where we start talking about why I would suggest looking at like a Wisycom to do that, because you're going to start with a very clean signal as is. You could, with the math, do it with a lot of other things, but you started then introducing things like we were talking about earlier, multipathing and phasing issues with having the same receiver cross multiple antenna zones.
Now, with the fiber transmitter, and then we'll get back to questions, and I'm sorry to go down this rabbit hole, it does have attenuation on the transmitter, right? So can you use that attenuation as part of the attenuation for the input, or should that be done with like a hard attenuator?
The recommendation would be do it as external. Okay. It's got some attenuation, but that attenuation is mainly meant for when it's in antenna mode.
I see. Okay.
So the BFL will do antenna mode or IFB mode.
Is there a button on it?
Yes, there's a menu setting you flip, and you select antenna mode or IFB mode.
Good to know. Okay.
And that's on the T and the R, because they both need to be set respectively.
Interesting. Okay, cool. All right, so Kyle has another question. What are some things that you are seeing in the film industry that you would like to see Wisycom users see? And I would also say, I'm going to let you answer that, but I'm going to throw that back at Kyle and Whitney and anybody else who's watching. What are some of the things that you see in the film industry as people who are on set that you'd like to tell Geoff that you'd like to see? But Geoff, what do you think?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of things we've been looking at and watching. There's a lot of technologies out there that have potentials to be very interesting. Not just to the film industry, because a lot of the products we design work brilliantly for film, but they work for a lot of applications. I think one of the things, that we have a whole class on it later, is antenna distribution and expanding your coverage. I think there's been a long time where, and I don't know if you'd agree with us, that the concept of having multiple zones, having multiple sets of receive antennas, and then even adding fiber can all start to quickly feel a little bit daunting. But it's so incredibly attainable to expand your coverage and make your own situation, your life, a bit easier.
Got it. So Whitney has an idea, a lower cost IFB around a $500 price point. So that would be competitive with other, because the IFBs or IEMs that Wisycom has are super high quality, really designed for musicians on stage, I would say. But what I would assume that Whitney is referring to is having something that, will still sound good, doesn't have to be great, but that you can hand to a producer, and if they walk away with it or lose it or drop it, nobody's going to be like, how could that cost $1,300? Because it happens all the time. It's one of the most often requested, like, hey, so-and-so lost this, give me a replacement quote. And we get at least 2 or 3 of those a day. So anyway, that's an idea for you.
Yeah, IFB as a whole, I'm hesitant because there's a way I'm supposed to answer this one, because I know there's
I like it.
IEMs and IFBs are a whole question mark of things I'm not allowed to talk about right now. But there ends up being effectively some trade-offs you have to make if you want to have a lower cost product. And the question, when we get in this in R&D is what trade-offs are you willing to make for a $500? And this is not to be disparaging of any product on the market. It's just in the way that Wisycom approaches R&D is if you want to be at a low price point, you have to make trade-offs.
Right. Yeah, there are sacrifices for sure. And
the question becomes, what do you want to trade off? Do you want to have less range? Do you want to have less autonomy, less frequency, agility? What a lot of things. Materials, do you want it to be more fragile?
Whitney, what do you think? And in all seriousness, I do think it's an interesting forum to have this, and Kyle as well. So Kyle says, recording and transmitting, there are patent issues with that. So, we all know about that. But that agrees that the better IFB hop price point, it seems like every year people want to hear more. And I assume that what he means by that is that they want to hear better. That they want the quality, and that the older VHF systems that people have been using, they're not as happy with it. I'll give you a quick aside, and I won't name names, but when I first started in reality television, I had a VHF system for my IFBs, and I was working on a reality show. Super fun. And so these particular VHF IFBs, if you had a walkie next to them and you cued the walkie, they weren't shielded well enough. So those 4 watts would just go straight in, and then it'd go. And I had this producer come running in from the van. He was like, "What the heck are these Cracker Jack things? Oh my God." And boy, did I sell those fast. Anyway, different for film and TV. Obviously, reality is its own monster. So everything's fine. 3, is there documentation or a manual available for Wisycom Manager? It can be daunting for first-time users, especially when digging into the WDF part. What does WDF mean?
So WDF is on every Wisycom transmitter, from the belt packs to the rack mount stuff, is what we call, it's a frequency memory file. So 40 groups, 60 channels.
Oh, that one. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's built in that it has a bunch that if you're not a super depthy RF person, you could run some scans, find some good frequencies. Or in larger environments, you can completely eliminate what's in there and put your own custom frequencies in, like we see in a lot in the touring environments where they've got 30, 40, 50, 60 channels of wireless, and they're having to coordinate every day.
That sounds horrifying. It sounds absolutely awful.
And then, mind you, for the touring environment, like 60 channels can, for some of these show, be on the low end.
Yeah, that is a solid dislike from me. Just thumbs down. Whitney said, well, we're back to the IFBs, which is great. Well, you need to tell us what the trade-offs would be. So you talked about potential trade-offs to get something that cheap, and it's obviously like, there's a lot of R&D that goes into this, right? So we're talking about build quality, right? Because Wisycom is all like, is it machined aluminum?
It depends on the product. A lot of them will be like a magnesium alloy.
Ooh.
There's some stuff that's like a zinc alloy, but some of them, the magnesium is both the more durable and the lightest in weight.
I hear that magnesium is good for stress.
I don't know.
I think it is. Yeah.
I mean, I feel less stressed with Wisycom devices.
I hear ingesting it, and this is not me promoting anybody swallowing transmitters.
The MTP61 is not that waterproof.
Exactly. Oh boy, terrifying. But build quality, right? So you'd probably, to get to 500, you'd probably have to go with some kind of plastic, I'd imagine. Right. I mean, just
and I wouldn't want to speak for R&D on any of this.
Yep.
This is just the kind of a relayed thing of what.
Yeah.
Because a lot of the decisions are made by people who are in that world remarkably smarter than I am in designing these things.
But the other thing you talked about was potentially frequency range. You might not be able to have the full Wisycom, 470 to 960. In that kind of a cheaper IFB, you might have to block it out, and then sound quality and features, right? So it's like, are you going to be able to do scanning? Are you going to be able to do?
So you want all these things, and the Bluetooth and the LoRa and all these other things,
right?
It's a question that is probably something to be had offline, and it's something that I think when we get to that phase, that I know Italy is very interested and open to the suggestions and input from our users. Most everything we do is built off of what we've been asked for.
Right. So yeah, Whitney, Kyle, everything's fine. Let Geoff know. Because I assume you all have his personal contact information. So let me just ask, while we wait for more questions, you just got back from Italy.
I did.
Was that your first foray, or?
No. I went, with COVID was funny when I got hired, and then we were just so busy. And I went for a little bit back, maybe a year or two ago, and then I was there for about a week, couple weeks ago, and it was a blast. It's always fun to be there. It's like a whirlwind of sleep-deprived adventure.
And what part of Italy is Wisycom in?
So Wisycom is in the northern part of Italy. So if you're familiar with Italy at all, it's sort of, think of where Venice is, and then it's about a 45 or so minute drive to the north.
You have this in the slideshow?
There's a video. It doesn't have sound that matters. But, just in case you're unfamiliar with Wisycom, in 2019, Wisycom moved into a 100,000 square foot facility in this very small town called Tombolo, which is outside of a slightly larger town called Cittadella, which is in northern Italy. So all of this is, and this is an older video, but all that's where we just went through was R&D. Here, I'll back it up. This is really cool. Like his name is Dennis. He manages like the MCR, MPR. It's Francesco, the mechanical designer. Some of the R&D like testing areas.
How do you guys keep it so clean? That's what I want to know, because my desk is a disaster.
Oh, so is mine. Yeah, but it's all managed incredibly well, and everything's built there in Italy.
Look at that. Now that's cool. And also like the fast forward and camera movements. That's pretty fun. And then, okay, so getting back to questions and comments, Kyle says, congrats on being on the final episode of Grand Tour. I don't know what that is.
It's did you ever watch like Top Gear, Jeremy Clarkson, the car driving guys? Yeah.
You personally were on
No,
that?
The Wisycom. So nice. At the end of the final episode, Jeremy Clarkson takes off his transmitter as like their farewell, and then you pull it out and you see it's an MTP60.
Oh wow, okay. So Kyle wants to know, how was the 6061? Have they been received since the 61 has been out for a year now?
It's been very well received. I mean, everyone loves. I got to take some of my personal bias. I love the 61. The 60 is a great transmitter as well. For the kind of things I do, like I work for Wisycom. I make some wedding things, like I do like films and things on the side. So the 61 has been a great thing in my world.
Yeah. I mean, if you got to hide a transmitter, having something tiny is fantastic, and the battery life and the transmission power is impressive.
Yeah.
It's was surprising when I found out how much people were getting out of it.
Yeah, I think about 8 to 10 hours, depending.
It's crazy.
Yeah,
it's crazy. At 100 milliwatts.
At 100 milliwatts.
Yeah, it's nuts.
And the whole jam with Wizy is if you use some filtered antennas, you can, we talk about dBm milliwatts. You could back down from being at 100, just move your LFA up a couple dB. There's probably a lot of RF theory nerds out there who are going to tell me don't do that.
Well, yeah, I mean, you have to beware the noise floor, that's for sure. All right, but if you're filtering, presumably if you're cutting out some of the external noise, if you can find something actually clean, maybe you could do that. Interesting. All right. So Richard Bullock is joining us. Thanks for being here, Richard. Has a question about the MRK16. That's the 16-channel multi-coupler. Is the new wireless board option that was announced intended to work with a future update to the Wisycom Bluetooth app to scan, make custom WDF charts, and then load to the 54s?
So a lot to unpack in that. And I'm beating myself up. I have one of those spectrum analyzer boards on my desk at home, and I meant to bring it with me just to show it off. But there's kind of a couple things. We announced a new version of the MRK16 with I think we called it SCA, which is a real-time spectrum analyzer built in. And to answer the next question that will probably pop up, it's the previous versions of MRK are not upgradable because we changed the entire main board.
Great. That was something that we had talked about at AES and what we weren't sure, and so now we know different.
Yeah, okay. It's a new generation of hardware internally, but we built in this real-time analyzer. I mean, within Wisycom Manager, you can already run a scan with any of the 54s that you have slotted in and use the tools to coordinate a plan and then deploy it to a WDF. What the real-time analyzer will do event is to let you see what's coming in on your antennas in real time while you're using your MCRs. Because right now, if you want to run a scan, you stop using one MCR.
Right.
What this allows you to do is keep using all 16 channels and see what's happening in real time.
And it does connect to Wisycom Manager, and forgive me if you already said that.
Yes, it will, because it connects internally through the MRK.
Yeah, and so then the question that Richard is asking is can you then will you be able to connect to that using the Bluetooth app,
It's an excellent question. I don't have the definitive answer on that one at the moment.
So let's put that aside. So with Wisycom Manager, if you're using that in the MRK16, can you use that scan to make the WTF charts and WDF charts and then populate the MCR54s with those charts?
Yeah. That'd be what you do with it, is once you get that scan, then you can build coordinations.
And you can do that all through the MRK16.
Yeah, through Wisycom Manager.
Cool. All right. Everything's Fine 3 asks, regarding whip antennas for the MPR IEM belt packs, how important is it to use the one the pack is asking for? So meaning, if you're up in let's say 653 and it's asking for, 600 some odd antenna, but you only have the 520 antenna, how much of an impact is that going to have?
The best case recommended is to use the antenna that it's asking for, because the MPR 50 comes with two antennas. It's an antenna with a little label that says 520 and another that says 634. And this really quickly dives into RF theory about like half wavelengths and quarter wavelengths of frequencies. Your best results are going to be with the antenna it's asking for. I got to be careful in saying this. It's probably not going to be the end of your show, but you'll get better results with the proper antennas.
Right. It will still work.
Yeah.
I'll give you a quick story from back in the day. So there was one time I was doing a sit-down interview. I remembered to bring everything except for my receiver antennas. And fortunately, it was like, the camera was as close as this shot is now. And I decided to use a paperclip. Yeah. And it was okay. I mean, it was like barely, I got just enough range in the 3 feet that I had, but you can, if you can get the RF signal in, it's going to be okay. So it really depends on, as you say, best case, you're not going to want to use a paperclip.
Yeah.
But, if you have an antenna that's not rated for it, it will still work, just not as well.
Yeah. It gets into a lot of things. There's a lot of just basic physics around a lot of this that make things still work fairly well.
Yeah, the laws of the universe do not apply over here.
Your paperclip reminds me of you remember years ago there was one guitar cable manufacturer that said they were the best one.
Oh.
And they got blind tested against a coat hanger and no one could tell the difference.
Oh no. Well, now we know. All right, so I want to do just a quick last call for any questions. So we'll give that a minute.
I feel like we're depriving the people of the wonderful art on the wall here.
For those of you that don't know, occasionally I will produce an indie film or two. And so the last one I did was 140 years ago in 2019. In an indie film, you don't necessarily always hire an extra or a stand-in. So I was able to be featured, which is funny that I have the mustache now because up until this year I'd never had a mustache. So that was photoshopped in to a movie called First One In, where I played, Dick Duncan, I think was the name. I was dead. So this was a picture of me dead. Yeah.
So in memoriam, I guess.
Yeah, in memoriam. But
yeah,
anyway.
I just wanted to, while we were waiting, I just wanted to share with the people because I'm looking across and all I can see is that.
Well, that's all I see in my nightmares. All right, so Richard has a follow-up question about the MRK16 and Wisycom Manager. Is there an update anytime soon that will tune all 4 channels of the 54 within the 32 megahertz limitation?
As it happens, let me find my teams, because I had a message from my colleague in Italy who said to me something. Yes, it contains the frequency calculator to do that. So I have a beta that we're testing that's very close to release to be able to do exactly that, of take a scan and then give you frequencies within the 32 meg sections for your MCR 54s.
Nice. And just to put that out there, we talk about filtering, right? And you talk about adding, being able to add gain within a filter. And that is one of the things that makes the Wisycom system perform so well, is that you're specifying a 32 megahertz chunk that you're focusing on. So you're going to find the best 32 megahertz chunk you can and work inside that, rather than trying to work within the entire spectrum and potentially taking in all that stray RF energy.
Yeah, because the basic idea of RF in general, and this applies to really any RF system, is the smaller the window you can have of what it's receiving, the better you're going to be. Mm-hmm.
Right. It's an interesting thing to, it used to be when we were all in these 24 megahertz blocks or smaller. that, is like, oh man, I just wish I had more frequency options. But you don't think about like, oh, now that you have all these frequency options, in order to get it to perform well, you have to squeeze it down kind of back into that. But at least you have the option to kind of hop around.
Yeah, because the idea of basic RF, like we'll go to the very non-theoretical side is, I'm in the studio here. Let's say I'm a mic receiver. Nate is my transmitter. He's on the other side of this room. Nate is talking at, let's say, 10 milliwatts. But Nick next to me is a DTV channel, and he's screaming at like 800 kilowatts. So I'm trying to ignore Nick and listen to Nate from across the room.
Yep.
Same applies if he's a 200 milliwatt IFB transmitter on my bag next to my receiver. The entire game is signal to noise and filters.
Got it. Kyle has another feature request. Wants to know why you can't see time code or time code settings in the Wisycom mobile app. I think that's a feature request.
Yeah, that's an excellent question. I'll escalate it with our app team.
It's going across the pond. I know that's a British thing. What do they say in Italy? They're just like...
they don't really have a...
Going to Corsica. All right, anyway, so we got a bunch of thanks here. Whitney, Kyle, Richard, everything's fine. Anybody who's watching, thank you. Jeff, thank you.
Yeah,
thanks for coming up. It's always great to see you on the Northeast Corridor.
Yeah, thank you. Always glad to be up here. I live in New York. Love being here. Love being everywhere.
Yeah. All right. Well, anyway, thank you so much for watching. As always, you can follow us on all the social medias. We got the Facebook, we got the Instagram, we got the X, aka Twitter, and I think we still have TikTok. And you can always email us at info@gothamsound.com if you have any questions or want to set up a demo of any of the things we've talked about. And if you want to know more about Geoff, we'll send you his personal bio. I'm kidding. Anyway, all right. Thank you so much for being here. Watch GothamSound.tv for more videos like this. Thanks, and see you next time.